The first thing you notice about eternity is the quiet. After the asteroid cracked the upper sky and smeared itself into a shroud of carbon-black dust, the wind stopped making daylight sounds. No bird sang, no leaves dared whisper, and even the rivers learned to flow like thieves. We called it the nightfall, but the word night never deserved its article. Night had once been a rhythmic partner that traded places with dawn. This new darkness was a ruler, a tyrant that forgot what surrender meant. For 34 years, the ash roofed the world, sealing us inside a starless vault. Humanity survived by manufacturing its own constellations. Bioluminescent spores, gene-spliced vines, fungal street lamps, and most coveted of all, the glimmering algae that brightened the rivers. I was born a decade after impact, in Meridian, the tallest of the light cities. Our towers were braided from helical glass and clothed in panels of cultured coral that pulsed blue-white like immense hearts. Light was life, weapon, currency, divinity. Children learned to measure distance in lumen steps, how far the glow of a lantern would carry before the black swallowed it. Mothers taught lullabies whose notes rose and fell with the surge of our power grid, sinking sleep to the dimming of household orbs. And every citizen, before reaching adulthood, swore the radiant oath to guard our brilliance against the hunger of rival polities. Rival meant a Noctiluca, always Noctiluca, the city across the broken valley. They perched on basalt cliffs, weaving rubescent plankton into banners that bled against the soot horizon. Meridian said Noctiluca stole their glow by raiding roaming convoys, that they adulterated pure algae with inferior breeds. Noctiluca replied that Meridian pumped toxins into the river to starve upstream villages of light. Truth lay somewhere in the shadows between our cities, but truth had grown irrelevant. The Light Wars offered cleaner narrative arcs. Every few years, when stores ran low or new seams of algae surfaced in neutral wetlands, skirmishes erupted. Each side volleyed packages of hypernutrient powder or plague enzymes, hoping either to fertilize its own stretch of waterway or debilitate the opponents. Entire brigades marched not beneath flags, but beneath handheld luminaries, and generals timed assaults for maximum psychological dazzle. Whoever owned the rivers owned the future. My trade was information, the only commodity harder to mine than Loomis. By day, or what passed for day, I bicycled between districts, delivering memory wafers etched with encrypted sensor logs. Unlike ordinary couriers, I preferred the unlit alleys where fungal sconces had burned out, because darkness welcomed secrets. Meridian's watchman called me Shadow Moth, a joke on the speckles of cream paint I wore across a black duster, to avoid looking like a perfect human silhouette under infrared scopes. I confess the nickname pleased me. It was easier to be a myth than an orphan. One cycle, as the chronometers struck meridian dusk, a ceremonial dimming to emulate old sunsets, I was summoned to Colran Spire, Meridian's seat of governance. Usually I served merchants and gutter scholars. Being called upward meant either promotion or disappearance. The lift shaft was paneled in living kelp glass, each frond tiny glowing, to form a waterfall of teal. High Counselor Vel eyed me through its transparency, like a hawk studying prey beneath ice. "You know the Shimmer Run?" she asked when the doors sighed open. I swallowed. The run was a contested gorge south of the valley, newly discovered to contain virgin currents of verdant algae. Rumor claimed Noctiluca planned to dam the gorge within weeks. "We need a courier capable of dark traversal," Vel continued. "You'll escort a strike charter to our forward bunker, where it must remain sealed until command authorizes deployment. If intercepted, you will ignite this." She handed me a clay canister the size of my palm. A bloom obscura. Flash burns everything within 10 paces, including you. Better blindness than betrayal. I bowed. Declining was not an option in Meridian's lexicon. That night, I rode out beyond the final lattice of city lights. The wastes had once been farmland, but rows of wheat lay fossilized in ash, their stalks petrified into bone-pale sculptures. Somewhere between the ghost barns and the dry creek, I encountered the eclipsed, wandering exiles whose clans adopted permanent dark vision tech, their eyes replaced with calcite globes. They hissed territorial warnings, but my lanternless passage convinced them I carried nothing worth stealing. After 6 hours, the terrain funneled into the Shimmer Run Gorge. Bright, unclaimed, dangerously loud water singing against basalt. And there he stood, illuminated by the river's jade sheen, a man in armor woven from Noctiluca's red plankton threads. We noticed each other in the same heartbeat. Weapons emerged. My ceramic dart pistol, his scythe blade reactive to muscle voltage. Yet neither of us fired or swung. The glow painted us equally visible. Any aggressive motion would decide the encounter instantly. "Courier?" he ventured, voice echoing an education like mine. "Depends who's asking." He raised a gloved hand. "Arik of Noctiluca. My orders parallel yours, I suspect." I dared a glance at his hip satchel. The same pattern, mirrored colors. 2 couriers, carrying kill plans aimed at each other. I tasted the bitter comedy of strategy. Lightning without thunder cracked overhead. The auroral discharge from Meridian's skyward reflectors, calibrating for war. Far off, Noctiluca's tandem retinas flickered ruby to intercept. We had hours, perhaps minutes, before the first salvos converted the gorge into a cauldron. "Listen," Arik said. "My family fished this river before either city discovered its glow. I'm told to deliver a pathogen that'll cork Meridian's algae filters for years. Thousands starve." He paused. "I suspect your charter is symmetrical." My silence confirmed it. He removed his helm, revealing scarlet dust streaks and irresolute eyes. "But there's older gossip. A dawn rising, real dawn. Observatories up north measured a thinning in the ash. Suppose daylight returns. Suppose we no longer need to bleed rivers. Why wage a war whose premise expires tomorrow?" The idea flashed through me like stolen sunlight. I, too, had skimmed contraband reports, S-band radar readings of upper strata erosion, a narrowing of the fine particle blanket. Nothing conclusive. And yet, the rumor stoked subversive hope among scholars, especially the Umbral League, a clandestine think hall that sometimes hired me for off-record runs. "If we nullify both payloads," I said, "Command will send replacements." "Unless Command can't." Arik's grin flickered dimly. "There's an infrastructure nexus down valley. Old satellite uplink. I've studied its schematics. If we hijack the broadcast, show live thermal images of dawn light bleeding through ash, they'd have to negotiate," I finished, "because their citizens would demand it." Part of me whispered traitor. Another part, older and lonelier, whispered daughter of ruin. Flip the board. I nodded. We clamped magnetic patches together, sealing my Meridian sigil to his Noctilucan crest, a temporary truce emblem, forging one silhouette out of rival hues. Navigating the plumbing of the gorge was nightmare cartography. Labyrinth rock, sudden sinkholes where luminescent water vanished, then resurfaced with new brilliance, and night predators that hunted glow like moths. The worst were the shimmer wolves, genetically orphaned descendants of pets whose fur had bioengineered strands, meant to gather household photons for warmth. In the wild, packs fed directly on algae banks. We crossed one of their territories, our combined glitter making us irresistible targets. Arik fed his scythe's capacitor, enough charge to strobe ultraviolet, confusing their photoreceptors long enough for us to slip past. I memorized the move. In times like these, knowledge was a second spine. The uplink tower slanted sideways atop a ridge scarred by ancient orbital debris. Rusted dish petals formed a steel lotus tilted to the eclipse. The inner control room, long abandoned, still smelled of ozone and rodent musk. We spliced lines from Arik's field generator into a corroded mainframe, uncertain if the machine would wake after decades of sleep. When it did, green glyphs shuddering across the interface, I half believed we'd tempted a ghost. While code compiled, I cracked open my charter tube. Inside nestled a data shard, no thicker than a fingernail, labeled Radiant Spring. Its metadata answered the question I'd never dared ask. How would Meridian conquer the river? The shard contained a mapped gene cluster, tailored to the shimmer algae, hijacking its photosites to emit frequencies invisible to humans, but toxic to any competitor strain. Once uploaded to seeding drones, it would scrub Noctiluca's holdings without outward sign. Silent murder, hidden inside expected brightness. I slammed the shard onto the console and crushed it with a boot heel. A burst of violet sparks died like miniature prayers. Arik destroyed his pathogen vial in kind, letting the viscous crimson hiss when it contacted scrap circuitry. No going back. We keyed the transmitter. Above us, the dish convulsed, shaking free a gout of ash that drifted earthward like sighing snow. The feed stitched kiln-warmed images from an atop Atmos lens, an orbital left, tumbling after the crash, but still sporadically powered by ragged solar wings. And there, at the edge of sensor grain, glimmered the impossible, a feather of amber across black. The sun, reduced yet stubborn, leaking through a thinning mantle. I choked on a sound halfway to laughter. Arik boosted the contrast, and the plume widened into a crescent. Dawn, unborn but undeniable. We spooled the footage across open channels, civilian bands, military reserves, pirate frequencies. Meridian's code talkers tried to jam us. Noctiluca's mirrored them. Somehow, the uplink punched through. Overload alarms howled as the generator bled amperage. When sparks ignited, Arik kicked free the relay couplings, shouting for evacuation. Outside, the sky flickered with unnatural neon. Both city-states had launched their opening attacks, banks of mirror lasers stitching the void. But something shifted in the choreography. Beams wavered, disengaged, reoriented. They'd seen the broadcast. Confusion rewrote targeting algorithms. Then Meridian's secondary plan hatched. An emergency Lumibomb dropped upstream as punitive measure. The bomb ruptured, dumping a pharmacopoeia of growth accelerants and pigment amplifiers. The river answered with bioluminescent frenzy. Emerald turned white-hot, frothing giant champagne bubbles that burst in retina-searing pops. We saw fish cooking alive, scales lighting like fuses. The glow intensified until the gorge looked hollowed by lightning. If that bloom reached the wetlands, oxygen crash would suffocate every settlement in its path. Arik and I sprinted along the ridge toward the point where tributaries braided the main current. Our plan, invented as we ran, was suicidal simplicity. Divert. Blow open the old mining sluice and channel half the river into the dead marsh, where no one lived because the soil was poison. The algae would exhaust itself there, roaring into brightness until nutrient depletion quenched it. We reached the sluice wheelhouse, lungs full of ash. The valve gears were locked by corrosion thicker than knuckles. I emptied my dart pistol's ceramic needles into hinge pins. Arik used the scythe like a lever. Steel groaned. Above us, the aurora of war still spasmed, but its pattern softened, warping into searchlights, scanning for answers. The sluice screamed open. Water veered, splitting like broken glass. A continent of glowing foam surged into the dead marsh, painting blackened trunks green-white before igniting them in sizzling chem-flame. The marsh gulped each wave greedily, as though it had missed being a candle. We collapsed beside the wheel, our armor aglow from algae mist. From here, we could see both cities, a constellation of two hearts. Meridian's towers dimmed in ripples, citizens collectively lowering lights in a ritual that signaled ceasefire. Across the valley, Noctiluca's cliffs mirrored the gesture, red fading to maroon, to ember, to rest. Wind arrived, timid but real, pushing the curtain of ash sideways, and through that corridor sailed a single star. No, not a star. The sun, a pinpoint yet inbound. For the first time, I felt the scale of humanity's arrogance. We'd been warring over lanterns, while a furnace large enough to immolate worlds begged to re-enter our lives. Light, real light, made our engineered glows look like children wearing fireflies for jewelry. At dawn, -3 hours, counting by the orbital feed's predictive overlay, delegates from both city-states converged at the valley's neutral plateau. I, Shadowmoth of Meridian, and Arik of Noctiluca were commanded to accompany as living proof that cooperation could flourish in dark. The plateau had once been a rest stop for caravans. Now its stone benches were dusted in chlorophyll fallout, giving everything a spectral tinge. Counselor Vel met us wearing travel-stained robes stripped of insignia. Her eyes measured the horizon. Not me. "I saw your betrayal," she said, though her tone lacked heat. "I saw your bravery," corrected Noctiluca's Governor Kale to her right. Their shoulders, once squared like boxers, had rounded with exhaustion. They waited for us to speak. I told them about the orbital feed, the thinning ash, the sun. Arik described the aborted weapons, the river we sacrificed, the marsh's new graveyard glow. He admitted neither side could claim victory. Both sides, perhaps, could claim relief. "What next?" Vel asked. I pointed at the brightening seam overhead. "We prepare to meet an old friend, one we've long forgotten how to greet." Negotiations unfolded beneath false starlight. They agreed to joint stewardship of the Shimmer Run, to dismantle mirror arrays built solely for warfare, to redirect the algae's bounty toward rebuilding surface farms that would soon need sunlight more than glow. They asked Arik and me to serve as envoys, bridging years of suspicion. I accepted, conditionally. I would not again become a pawn whose loyalty could be sung with threats. Arik laughed, saying no pawn ever blew open a sluice line of that size, so maybe we'd already promoted ourselves. When the moment arrived, it did so quietly. No trumpet, no choir, just a paling of the vault, a reversal of centuries-old dark adaptation. Clouds, real clouds, appeared as gray ghosts, then pink. The sun cracked the horizon, like a molten coin pried from stone. Daylight rolled across ash plains, waking petrified wheat to trembling embers of tan, revealing colors memory had hidden in sepia. People stumbled from their homes, shielding dilated pupils, weeping at the simple geometry of shadows. Meridian's coral towers blushed violet under ultraviolet components they'd never been meant to absorb. Glass burst as algae embedded inside, overheated, fizzing neon against new thermal load. Noctiluca's cliff balconies fared better. Their plankton, accustomed to native sunlit seas before the asteroid, soaked up rays with greedy joy, turning red into gold. Across both cities, power grids flickered as households shut lamps in astonishment. Generations of bioluminescent engineering fell silent, humbly obsolete. But night would come again, honest night, cyclical, perhaps kindly. The algae still mattered for after-hours living, for medicine, for memory of our long vigil. Light, we realized, wasn't a single monarch, but a spectrum of sovereignties. Days later, I visited the dead marsh by dirigible to survey aftermath. The overbloom had burned itself out, leaving acres of pearlescent crust that crackled underfoot like frost. Among skeletal trunks, I found new shoots, albino reeds unafraid of dawn, their tissues retaining faint glow, meant now only as ornament. Life, given chaos, performed alchemy. Arik approached across the crust, raising a hand in greeting. "You think they'll keep the peace?" he asked. "People forget fear quickly," I said. "But they remember wonder. We bought them a sunrise. That's difficult to squander." Together, we watched a school of aerial gnats trace hieroglyphs above the reeds, each insect carrying a shard of captured daylight in its abdomen before releasing it as a wink of fire. Bioluminescence would not surrender, only adapt, and so would we. For while the age of eternal night had ended, the practice of forging light out of despair would forever remain our greatest inheritance.